Welcome to another episode of Behind the Shield. My name is Gary Damer. I'm going to be your host today. And today we have Jeff Bivens in the conversation. And what I'd like to do is start the podcast with a brief introduction of Jeff so he can talk a little bit about himself, his background, and his path to how he got into cloud. Along with that, his path into FedRAMP as well. So maybe you can describe those two items. That'd be awesome.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me on the show, first of all.
Absolutely.
And to answer your question, my path to the cloud was pretty straightforward. I started in a software company in the late 90s. It was on-prem client server deployment model. And in the early 2000s, our company was competing with a couple SaaS startups like ServiceNow and Salesforce.com. And if you can imagine,
Something
those companies, those companies used to be little tiny companies with just a couple hundred employees, and we were competing with them, and we were losing deals, and it intrigued me, their deployment model, and our architecture needed to be rebuilt for the company I worked with to be able to move towards a SaaS deployment model. And so I got to be a part of that team. I was really fortunate to be a part of that Tiger team that was creating the next generation of software for our company. And I was so intrigued by how this might all work. And then I got an opportunity to work for a SaaS startup in Austin, Texas. And so I made the switch to a startup, 20-person company with big dreams and a SaaS deployment model. And so that's how I got started in cloud, and really never looked back.
So before you jump back into the FedRAMP side, that's really interesting. So you saw it, even working in the early stages, that this whole SaaS delivery model was going to be a big thing for the future. What was
Absolutely.
it that really intrigued you? Was it because Salesforce and ServiceNow were landing more jobs than you guys were, or what was it that really made you say, hey, this is the thing for the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So I was on the customer side, serving customers. I started in customer support, taking calls out of the telephone queue. How can I
Wow.
help you with our software? And I got to see firsthand where customers were having challenges, not just with their business and how we could help them, but with our software, and especially our client server-based software. And so many times I would think, gosh, if we could only overcome compatibility issues with various database backends, for example, or user interface issues, if we could only release more frequently instead of having to release 4 times a year and ship them a CD, right? So all the things that we take for granted now, you know, were things that our customers were struggling with. And the worst thing of all was when we'd ship a major release, maybe twice a year, and then we'd find an issue, a bug, and then we'd have to spend the next several months helping customers work around those bugs. And I didn't want that. I wanted our customers to have the benefits of the software we were developing in their hands as quickly as possible. And I knew it was going to be better for everyone.
Cool. That's an interesting dynamic, because that's really what has made the SaaS industry, really the cloud industry, successful, is that ability to react quickly to issues. So you did that, and then what about the that next big phase, which was maybe migrating to some of those skills that you learned into the FedRAMP space?
Sure. Yeah. Well, oh my gosh. I mean, that SaaS startup that I helped build in Austin, Texas, did phenomenally well, and Dell acquired us. Dell was a product company, and Dell was starting to see market erosion from infrastructure as a service companies like AWS, and Google was starting their cloud offerings in the late 2000, around 2008, 2010, into 2012. And that's about the time after Dell acquired us that I'd been moved into a program management role and was helping build cloud offerings for Dell to try to retain some of that market share and even grow into the SaaS and IaaS space. And then at one point, my boss came up to me and said, "Hey, we've got this new program that we'd like you to work on. Think you can get let you sink your teeth into this." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he said, "It's a federal cloud." And I said, "Interesting, very interesting." And I thought back to my own history as an Air Force brat and growing up around the world, traveling around and seeing my father in uniform. And I thought, I'd like to serve our country in some small way, right? And if this is a way to do that, that would be great. And so I worked with a little division of our company called Dell Services Federal Government, formerly Perot Systems Government Services. And they wanted to build an infrastructure as a service offering, taking advantage of, think of it as cheap hardware, right? We were a product company and we had access to all the storage and all the servers and compute, all the networking, all the firewalls, right? We built and sold those components, but we had a dream of taking those components, putting them together, and building our own infrastructure as a service platform. That dream was not mine, but it was a very visionary CTO at the time that was able to kind of put this architecture together, and I got to serve in a program management role to try to make it a reality.
Cool. We're actually scheduling to get him to come on the podcast as well, by the way. So during that time frame, that's kind of where you met us,
Yeah.
in that project management role, and that's kind of the operations role, operations management lead. To me, I think that process and procedures and operations are some of the most important things in the FedRAMP space. And I think that's one of the things that really attracted, I think you and I together, is because that whole project management perspective. I had my PMP at the time, and I think you were just starting to work on your PMP, and we were chatting back and forth about the importance of program management and why it's important in this FedRAMP thing. I'm going to call it a thing for just a second, because it really is a process. It's not about the technology. It's not about the individuals trying to bring in their nice whiz bang latest technology, which that absolutely is an outcome of the process and understanding what that process is. When you first looked at this, and I know because it was kind of probably a little bit overwhelming in the beginning, but when you looked at it, how did you look at it from a program management, operational management ways, and what kind of things did you bring into the overall, let's figure out how we need to get, how we can use this thing to get it accredited so we can start selling it? Does all that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gary. It's a really great question. And I'd love to say that I had it all figured out. I really didn't. I'd experienced some success prior to being assigned this big infrastructure as a service, this FedRAMP Cloud Pursuit program, and I thought the things that got me there would continue to help this program achieve success, and they didn't, unfortunately, at least not right away. I had to grow and learn, and to your point, as you mentioned, I had to gain professional project management skills. I had to learn the difference between projects and programs. I had to manage a portfolio of technology and vendors. And those were all skills that I did not have when I was assigned this work. But they were absolutely essential to our eventual success. And I will say it was difficult. But I enjoyed it, right? I enjoyed learning the skills of a project management professional. Things like risk management, for example, that I had never had exposure to. Project risk in this case, but But every time I'd learn a new skill in my PMP studies, I could apply it that day, that week, to the
Mm-hmm.
work that we were doing in pursuing this program. Stakeholder management, right? Communication management, scope management. And each time I would apply one of those skills in those domain areas, I'd find things got a little bit better. And so by the end of the program, not only did we get our ATO, our authorization to operate, but I also got my PMP. And so it was kind of a nice collaboration, you might say.
Right, right. Now, you stayed, at Dell for a while, and then I think NTT Data acquired this portion of the business.
That's right.
You moved on to your next role. And how did you take these same set of skills into that next role as well? And what did you do to kind of help them through that process as well, from a high level? It doesn't have to be all the details. So,
Sure. Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, I moved from building an infrastructure as a service platform and taking that through the FedRAMP ATO process to a SaaS company, which is really where I probably felt most familiar. And I felt familiar with the FedRAMP process as well, having been through it the previous 3 years. And so you don't often get a do-over in your career, a chance to do it again. But this was my do-over. This was my chance to take everything I'd learned about the FedRAMP process and both on a technical, operational, and business level, and try and do a better job than I had done before. And wonderful opportunity. And yeah, and we did it so much faster. What took us several years previously, we did 2 ATOs in 2 years.
right.
First at the low impact SaaS level, and then at the moderate impact level. So much more rapidly, and we did it much more cost effectively as well. We were able to use our own tools for package prep, for all the documentation. And that made things much faster and easier. And then for the implementation of the technical controls, we were able to use FedRAMP authorization pursuit as a chance to pull together these technical teams to really revisit how they were managing the infrastructure to begin with. Folks on the DevOps side, the release and CI/CD team, the configuration management. We really looked at every aspect of it. And so as opposed to a compliance exercise, we used it as an opportunity to implement hygiene, to level up our processes. And as a result,
Right.
we gained so much cost savings that what
Wow.
we spent for outside services was more than made up for in cost savings from AWS and Google Cloud Platform infrastructure costs. So it was really a big win for the business in addition to getting the ATOs that we were pursuing.
And, that's something that, when we first started the business, that's kind of what we were looking at is we started out with the engineering and the process side, but as we rotated out of the Dell and the NTT data side, we really got more into the advisory, and we were helping customers with the process, to help them get their ATO. And what we found is a lot of people have really good technical people that work for them. They know cloud very well. They know how their systems are deployed. They know what they're doing today and what their lack of doing, as well. So I think what we were helping with teams, especially like that specific team and other teams just like that, and especially the beginning of all this, is helping them with that process and helping them understand what is going to help them through the audit. How would you solve this to answer the security question and then the audit question? And I think that's kind of how we looked at all these as we were going through that. So having that good solid team behind you, I think, really also helped. I mean, I think this is true. Tell me if it's not. But I think you guys built that entire application from the ground up, right? So you guys knew everything about it from that capability. So you also then knew how to make things better, in order to meet the FedRAMP requirements, and then improve your overall processes as well. And then you had some
That's
very good,
right.
you had some very good project management capabilities in there as well, so we could track what needed to be done, when it needed to be done,
Mhm.
and who was responsible for it.
No, you're absolutely right, Gary. Yeah, this had been our homegrown application. We had been serving commercial markets successfully and growing quite rapidly. We had found a lot of success in the public space in state and local governments. And we had a fair bit of demand from the federal public space as well. Um, and so the question really was, how do we maintain the success that we were seeing in the commercial enterprise space and at the same time be able to serve the federal market? So yeah, another program management challenge, right? A lot of early scoping decisions. Do we do a federal community cloud or do we make it a public cloud, right? Do we do FedRAMP moderate? Do we do FedRAMP high? Right. Some really important early decisions that thankfully, with the help of InfusionPoints, we're able to think through the trade-offs, the pros and cons, the business benefits, and scope it in a way that was going to deliver best benefit for our company and our customers.
I tell you, some of those earliest decisions do really drive the way you ultimately develop your solution, and they're big rock decisions. So you've got to be able to make those big rock decisions. Do I go into GovCloud? Do I stay in the commercial? Do I build off of what I already
Yep.
have? That really determines how you and how much you need to budget. To kind of work your way through this. You know, one one of the things that we saw and we continued to see for years after that was just every time you did an audit on a solution, it was just taking such a long time, kind of get through the review process. And then when you got your review back, it wasn't always the best review, and sometimes it looked a lot worse than it really was, right?
Mhm.
um, I know you with you guys' experience, it was the same thing when we got your review back. It was, I don't know, 49,000 pages long, and there's a whole bunch. There was a whole bunch of issues. Even though we tried to caveat, look, they're going to find stuff in this audit, no matter what you do. They're going to
That's
find
right.
stuff. They're going to find stuff, and I think the team that did the auditing did a good job of the auditing. I think the review process and the PMO
Mhm.
side, they did a pretty good review, but there was a couple things that really threw us for a loop. But I think the biggest thing is just the amount of findings. Even though there are a lot of more, dot your I's, cross your T's kind of thing. And then once we kind of nailed it down, there was like three things that we had to fix within a certain time frame. We won't go into any of the detail of any of them, but we ultimately got them all fixed. So you guys got your ATO, and you guys got to move on.
That's right.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because with the whole FedRAMP 20x transformation, you know, you know, I'd love to hear it from your side, from even though you're on our side now, but from your perspective, of being a previous customer of the FedRAMP process, and then looking at what they're attempting to do to here, and then maybe you could talk about how it possibly can transform, if this is the word you want to use, but transform, federal compliance as we see it today, and hopefully others will
Sure.
follow along with that as well. So,
Sure. Yeah. No, FedRAMP's been around since 2011. And when Vivek Kundra, then CIO of the federal government, implemented the Cloud First program, and um, and it was transformational then, and it continues to be transformational, um, and it's hard, and it's hard. It's hard any way you slice it. There's a lot at stake,
and it
right?
should
Our,
be
our,
right,
our nation's infrastructure,
right.
and it should be
Yep.
absolutely. And and there have been times when the process was cumbersome, and so yeah, committing to a FedRAMP pursuit was committing uh, oftentimes several years and several $1 million of investment, and so that's a lot to invest when, especially for a company maybe that hasn't been serving the federal market. That's a big bet to place, and uh, and it doesn't always pay off. um, for, for a variety of reasons. Um, and so if you look at what's happening with 20x, you're lowering the barrier to entry without lowering the security requirements.
Correct.
And that is a beautiful thing, right? You're allowing business to operate on a more effective free market principles without compromising security and giving government consumers access to the same technology that commercial enterprises are using to power and fuel their business, right? Even AI technologies that are coming out here over the last few months and years, and you're doing it without compromising the rigor of the security process. And I recognize 20x is still in pilot phase,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's still a lot to be learned. But the vision, the approach, and the benefits that'll be gained on the back end, not just for federal consumers and for the companies that serve them, but for all of the compliance industry, right? The challenges that come with establishing a system where third parties have the assurance and the trust in the vendor and in their supply chain, that is a universal challenge. That is not specific to the US federal government. Every nation's government struggles with it. Every commercial company struggles with it. It doesn't matter what geography of this world. And it's one of the reasons we have so many compliance frameworks. And so my hope, really, beyond just simplifying the FedRAMP process and improving how our own government works from an IT services capability, is that the industry as a whole will learn um, to be able to have more efficient and effective technology-driven continuous validation, machine readable controls, and letting humans do what they do best, which isn't creating pages and pages of documentation, right? But it's coming up with ways to mitigate the risk and innovate the systems that they're developing.
I couldn't have said it better. That's perfect. You know, I can. I'm starting to see a lot more traffic on LinkedIn and other places. You know, about how can this kind of philosophy maybe get itself embedded in other frameworks. And to me, as a person, we are a 3PAO, but we've never done an audit. We're mostly engineers and we build things to solve problems. But when you're on the other side and you do as many audits a year as we do, or as our team does, and you get different different grades of auditors, or different versions of folks for multiple different frameworks, when you have to answer the same question over and over and over again, it gets to be extremely tedious on the customer side, the person who's being audited. So having that capability of collected evidence once and then be able to use it multiple times, sort of like the FedRAMP motto in the very beginning, right? Audit once or build once, and then be able to leverage it across the government. We need to look at that same thing across multiple frameworks. I don't think the frameworks need to go away at all. I don't think any of the standards need to go away, because you have to have something to be able to measure by, right? But there's got to be a blending of the way you get audited, and be able to look across those multiple standards and come up with some common language. And let's stop using totally different language for the same thing, right? Um, we've got to be able to make that much more streamlined, and especially if you're in the cloud and you can use the cloud for auditing the information. That metadata is right there. You can grab a hold of that metadata, and then you can use that information in multiple ways. So making sure, this is just Gary Damer's opinion, just making sure that you are looking at the right things, right? Is it really the outcome of that check, or is it the check itself? So, I personally think it's the check. And I think ultimately you have to check the initial outcome and then eventually check, the outcomes of that check just to make sure that it's still doing the same thing it said it would do in the very beginning. But once you establish that validation or check, right, that should be golden. It should be stamped. And then every framework that says I need to understand and figure out how you do X, Y, or Z, you point them to your dashboards for that specific standard, and that evidence should be able to be handled pretty easily. But I think it's also on the CSP side that they need to be able to figure out how to automate this stuff to be able to produce that information that the multiple frameworks can use or reuse, right? So that mapping needs to be a lot clearer. There needs to be some general acceptance between the frameworks, because if there's just too many frameworks, people get very confused on how to actually deliver that information. Or if you're in constant audit, you get into audit fatigue, and you're not really improving the security. You're doing audit for audit's sake, right? Let me get this box checked. So we got to figure out how to make that a little bit easier, and then be able to prove that you're doing what you say you're doing without too many of the same questions being asked to the same engineering teams who have operational procedures and operational struggles that they have at their fingertips, right? I go back to something, and I stole this from you years ago, and I'm going to use it from the FedRAMP perspective, but I think this goes for any kind of cybersecurity perspective, but it's really more for the FedRAMP perspective is how you presented it to your team. FedRAMP is not something you do, it's something you become, right? I don't know if you remember saying that or not, but I use it all the time. I use it all the time. And I always say I attribute it to a previous customer. But I think it's still true. Cybersecurity is the same way, right? Cybersecurity isn't something you just do. It's really something you have to become to be able to see all those interconnections. And I think that really, plays into, how does that play across multiple frameworks? And I think more folks need to get on board with the automation side of this. And I don't think you need to remove the human totally. You still have to have the human in there to make sure that the validations are right. You still need to have the reviews, and you still need to have the frameworks, because you have to have something to measure it against, right? If you don't have a standard to measure against, in a specific country or a specific organizations wants to see those standards, how are you going to ever improve that you're doing cybersecurity to meet the needs of that specific customer set, right? And I think that's the value of the different standards today. I know it was a big, long-winded way to get there, but
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Gary. You bring up such a great point. For so many years, a certification, right? A SOC 2 certification, right? An ISO 27001 certification, or even a FedRAMP ATO. That was a proxy for assurance, right? That provided enough assurance that a consumer could make a decision to purchase and consume and store their most valuable data on that cloud-based system, right? And feel like the risk had been sufficiently mitigated, right? And that's kind of the world we've been in for the last sort of 2 decades. And that world is quickly going away. And that world is quickly going away. And to your point, it worked so well that there's a proliferation of compliance frameworks, right? And if you're a commercial cloud company operating in an international market, you are dealing with dozens of different compliance frameworks. Audit fatigue is real. The mismatching of controls is a real problem. The amount of effort, planning, operations, and cost that goes into maintaining multiple compliance certifications across multiple frameworks. I came from a company where every month of the year we were doing an audit, and we did our best to stagger them so that we, didn't have spikes in terms of, overrun our capacity. But all of the costs that goes into that are costs that get passed on to the consumer, right? Someone has to pay for that. And so not only is it not working economically, it's really quickly becoming not working operationally either. And threat actors are getting much more sophisticated. And so the complexity of these systems is becoming much more sophisticated. The cloud ecosystem, right? Um, the Look at the inheritance across the supply chain for cloud controls, and for cloud security controls. It's very sophisticated. And so yeah, what I love about FedRAMP 20x is it doesn't have the answers, right? But it lays out a set of principles and it lays out a set of expectations that agency consumers and industry and 3PAWs work together, right? And the FedRAMP PMO to orchestrate and facilitate, to work together to solve this problem that everybody's struggling with from
Right.
their own perspective, right? We
Totally.
know there's ways to solve it, but it takes new principles. It will take new technology, the kinds of technologies that InfusionPoints is building today.
Right.
And that's just a really exciting inflection point, for those of us who feel like we've been in this space for, decades, or more. We recognize that we're only beginning this journey. It's starting all over again, and that's a really exciting place to be for those of us that, love to tinker and engineer and make things better.
It does feel like we're taking it anew, taking a look at it, just like it's a whole new interface. It's a whole new thing. We can look at it. We can work onto it. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's why I jumped on this thing on 20x right away. And I remember when they first started pitching the idea. I remember talking with the person who was sitting next to me at the conference. And I was like, okay, this is what they're going to do here. This is how they're going to do this, and this. And but as I already even speak, I don't think he had any of it figured totally out yet. And he was really asking us as a community to go figure it out, which I
Hmm.
thought was like,
That's
wow,
right.
that's really interesting. I've been doing government contracting for years. Usually they gave me a set of requirements and I have to go do them. So this is a whole flip, right? This is a hey, help me figure this out. I'm gonna put some guidelines up there. I'm gonna put some some paths that I need you to kind of think about, and then maybe we'll talk about them, and then we'll work as a community to kind of work them together. And I think many folks were looking at each other, going, "Wow, man, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the right way to do this." And I don't think he was given any indication that this is the way we're going to go do this. He was just given some good guiding principles, and I think guiding principles,
Mhm.
and you unleash the innovation of Americans. I mean, come on, give us a good challenge, and we can go solve any problem, right? So give us a chance, and we'll solve them. But I think if you put us in too many boxes, it limits our creativity, it limits our innovation, so it doesn't give us that ability to think about how we would solve that specific problem in a whole new way.
Mhm.
Every day when I meet with the engineers, about our next 20x, I'm amazed by the things they come up with. And I'm like, wow, man, I would have never thought of that. But you get five or six of them, together, and they're coming up with really, really neat, innovative ideas how to solve these problems, that we have ahead of us with 20x. And they're even thinking about problems I never even thought about as being a problem, but they're even thinking about, the next phase of the pilots that are coming up, and trying to help solve these problems, you know. But with that said, Jeff, what I want to do here, I want to shift topics a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm going to put you on the spot because that's kind of what I like to do a little bit. So, you know, um, with Infusion Points, we've been in business for 18 years. I mean, you started doing business with us at 12. We were probably at 6 years old, maybe at that time. And for a VC type funded company, that's old and decrepit and should have been sold off three times over, right? But for a company like ours, with a whole different perspective on how we approach things,
Mhm.
we've changed a lot, since since that first introduction. You know, if you could do two things for me, kind of talk about at a high level here again, why is it that you came on board to help us, right? And then what have you seen that we've changed since that when you first met us 12 years ago to where we're at today, And I'd love to know if you think they're the same things I think. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's what brought me to the company. And how has the company changed over the 11 years since we've known each other?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of reasons why I wanted to join this organization. We've already touched on a few of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is an exciting space to be in. Federal cybersecurity compliance is so vital, and it opens up the doors for innovation across the industry. Um, FedRAMP 20x just makes that all the more powerful and relevant, and gives us working groups and support for that. So the timing couldn't be better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one thing we haven't touched on is is the values. When I first met you and Jason and the team at InfusionPoints back in 2014, the the values that you brought, the work ethic, the commitment and the dedication to serving our nation and to innovating in this space was inspiring. And there aren't, a lot of us like that. And then when you find kindred spirits that want to work in this space and that want to do this very difficult, challenging work, um, you're drawn to each other. And I've always said FedRAMP compliance is a team sport, right?
Yes.
And whether, same thing with DoD Security Requirements Guide,
Mm-hmm.
right? The DoD
Mm-hmm.
SRG. Federal cybersecurity compliance is a team sport. And whether you're on the assessment side or the advisory side or the CSP side or the agency sponsor side or the FedRAMP PMO, we have roles to play and we have a mandate to work together to accomplish the objective at hand and to help our agencies serve their missions. And so, yeah, um, I finally had the opportunity in my career to take on a role that connected with me at all levels, emotionally, intellectually, um, socially, and for that I'm so very grateful. So that's I think, in a nutshell, why
Mm-hmm.
my motivation, my why. As far as how the company's changed, we've talked about what hasn't changed, right? The
Right.
values, the mission,
Consistent.
the vision, no change whatsoever for as long as we've known each other.
Mm-hmm.
Those are so solid, you could take them to the bank.
Right.
That's just who we are, and that's who you've always been. But there have been changes, and I think the most there's so many, right, in terms of growing and new customer opportunities. But the biggest one for me was the change into becoming a cloud service provider,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most recently, right?
Right.
The shift is, this is an evolution that InfusionPoints has been going through now for what, 5, 6 years, but becoming um, an AWS experts and then becoming an AWS partner and then building AWS cloud systems and then building cloud systems in general, right? Interfacing with a variety of cloud platforms, and then ultimately building your own orchestration layer and software on top to manage operational processes and controls, vulnerability detection and response, and then taking that through the ATO process, through the 20x pilot
Mm-hmm.
program and becoming authorized. I mean, when we sat there in Washington, D.C., celebrating our first ATO together, uh, I don't think we would have ever dreamed that one day InfusionPoints would be a cloud service provider. And look at this now. So I think
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest change and the most exciting thing. And I think it's truly an indication of what this team is capable of doing in the next 10 years.
Cool. Cool. I I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think the other big change, and I think we were talking about that this morning, is the fact that we really were a pure services company. We helped people solve problems 1 hour at a time, right? And we hope for longer contracts, and we hope that we could help them solve the problems in kind of big blocks of time. We sold time. We sold our brains to go do stuff. We've shifted, and I think we're really leading, like you said, with a cloud service provider. We really have now, platform as a service, software as a service. We have that capability now, which we didn't have before. We have a product team. We have an engineering team that all they focus on is how do we build solutions to automate faster, to get things done faster in a more secure way. And to me, that's one of our biggest transformations. I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit envious of you when you were working at your previous company because you had such a great engineering team. I mean, they just work so well together. I remember describing some problem sets to them, and I remember them coming back and saying, "Oh yeah, we can fix that. Like in, I don't know, 24 hours. Give me 24 hours, I get it done." And then the next morning, they're done with what I described as what the issue was. And I thought that to me, I was a bit overwhelmed by the quality and the dedication of those engineers. And that was like, that's what I want to build. I want to build that, you know. But we had to figure out what the platform was, right? And what I mean by platform, I don't mean like platform as a service. What is it? What problems are we going to solve? What challenges are we going
Yeah.
to solve? That's what I mean. That's what I really mean by that, right? Um, I think that piece is phenomenal, right? Um, and I think that's one of our biggest changes and or evolutions, since we've started. That's something I always like to say: evolution, not revolution, because revolution is not good for you, not good for you sometimes. Now we have had some crazy pivots, and I think this is one of our latest revelations is realizing who we are right now and where we want to go to. And I think it's a very good place for us to be in. So um, I'm hoping that we can spend a few more minutes talking about, a couple other things. I really like to just get your idea on AI and how you think it's going to impact some of our services. Here again, not at a detailed level, maybe at a high level. We can have more detailed conversations as time goes on. But how do you think we can leverage AI to help our customers as well?
Yeah, what a great question. What a great question. Um, well, we all know with these complex cloud systems, there is a ton of information that gets generated, right? Through think of your SIM tool, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
all the logs, right? It's not uncommon for SIM tools to ingest terabytes of logs every day. And so, just asking AI to find the needle, right, in the haystack, the insights that we need to be able to have quicker and more accurate detection, for example. I think that's, just one of many, many examples where very tedious, challenging tasks can be given to an AI employee,
There you go.
as Chad likes to say,
That's it.
and simplify that work so that we can focus on coming up with creative mitigation strategies, right? And um, making it faster for us to respond so that we can reduce the threat. And so I think AI is yet another tool, right,
Mm-hmm.
in the security professionals toolbox to be able to do this work with less effort and more speed and higher quality. And while in management roles, whether you're in program management or people management, really the opportunity for us is laying out the challenge and uh, giving these engineers guardrails and supporting them with the tools so that they can more rapidly come up with ways to leverage tools like AI.
Cool. Cool. Um, Let me ask you a couple more questions, and then we'll go ahead and end this session. Seems like it's run a little bit long, but I think this has been a great conversation, and I'd like to continue it if that's okay with you. Um,
Sure.
um, so I think something else that we're doing here is somewhat new to you, although you and I have been talking about it probably for a few years. Is you're joining public companies to from VC funded companies to InfusionPoints, which is we're taking growth from a long term perspective. We're looking at how can we be pragmatic about our growth? How can we pace that? How can we make sure that innovations are put in play, but it's not changing too much to where we have to re-educate our entire workforce? Really focusing on our people first perspective, making sure that we make a profit so we can invest back into the company. You know, I, I know I already had some conversations about just changing just some specific views. For the longest time, people had asked me, you're building a lifestyle company. I'm like, yeah, I'm building a lifestyle company for 100 people, right? And maybe 5 years from now, it'll be 200 people, right? Or whatever the number is. But it's not really a lifestyle company. It really is a company for the future. It's really to be built kind of in a long term perspective as opposed to a short term perspective. Let me know what you think so far. I know it's been short, but and you're seeing some of the inside of how the the cider is made. So how's the presses?
Yeah, no, that's the technology industry is dominated, right, by um, companies that are either VC funded or PE funded, private equity, or public companies as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the evergreen company, right? The company that adheres to the um, the 7 Ps principles, the they're rare.
Mm-hmm.
They're rare. And and I had never had the opportunity in the technology industry to work for an evergreen company. And that was we talked about motivation. That was a big draw for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Was if for no other reason, just experience that, because I've experienced venture capital funded startups. I've experienced public companies, companies that were traded on the U.S. stock exchanges and even in stock exchanges in other parts of the world. I've experienced private equity uh, funded companies and owned companies, and but I've never experienced evergreen. And it takes me back to before I worked in technology. Um, I worked for mom and pop
Mm-hmm.
organizations. I worked as a commercial fisherman for a fisherman that owned his own boat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I worked for a farmer that owned his own land and grew his own cotton.
Mm-hmm.
And those families, uh, they looked at the long term, right? How do we invest in our soil so that this farm can continue to support my family long after I'm gone,
Right.
right? How do I manage this fishery so that I can pass this boat on to my children so that they can carry on the lifestyle that I've enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
and worked so hard to build, right? And that's happening in technology companies and cybersecurity companies and consulting companies as well. Um, and it's exciting to be a part of it because it definitely changes your frame of mind, right? You look at the choices you're making today as one small brick in a much longer or horizon and a much larger institution that you have the opportunity to shape and to build. And you not only uh, hope it will outlast you, you know it will outlast you
Right.
because of the design decisions you're making,
Mm-hmm.
because of the choices that you're making, because of the values that you live in your interactions with the team, with the customers. Um, yeah. Um, so so yeah, it's personal for me and it's exciting for me and it's new for me. To be able to take those principles, yeah, and apply them to a very rapid, fast-paced, innovation-driven environment.
It doesn't mean we slow down, right?
Not a bit, not a bit. Nothing slow about it. Yeah, sometimes you've got to go really fast and even
Mm-hmm.
faster.
Yep.
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
very scrappy at something. That's one of the reasons why we say one of our core values is scrappiness, right? So it's really our ability, to leverage ideas and money and cash flow to be able to do the things that we want to be able to do. So we got to be able to predict those things out in a way. We're not grow big fast. We're grow big long, right? So that's
Mhm.
it's definitely a different philosophy, and it's taken us a while to get where we're at. But I think all of us are happy, kind of doing our job on a day to day basis. So I appreciate that. So
You bet.
I'm gonna flip it around a little bit and say, do you have any questions for me? Because I do have three final questions for you. So
Yeah, here's one. What do you like best about this new podcast series that you've started, Gary?
it gives us, I think, the opportunity for people to see who we are because we've always been such a silent company about what we do because we've always been
Hmm.
helping others achieve their goals, right? And so we've been the unseen in this space for a long time because we didn't have communications with the FedRAMP PMO. That wasn't our job, right? That was our
Hmm.
customer's job. That was the 3PAO's job. 3POs got all the credit because they were on the marketplace. But, in the beginning, we had over 25% of the folks that we helped who got authorizations, but nobody knew who we were. Nobody knew who we were, right? We were
Yeah.
silent. And so I think this is going to give us the ability to demonstrate a bit about who we are and a bit about our knowledge and how we can help other folks. And hopefully they can listen in and gain some knowledge from it, and maybe we gain a new customer or two out of it as well. So or a new recruit, right? Because you always need to be able to figure out how to get the next person to help you get the job done as well. So great question, by the way. So
Fantastic.
plus everybody gets to hear my raspy voice. So all right. So if you don't have any other anything else, I'm going to ask you three other questions if you're ready.
Okay,
You ready? So easy
I'm ready.
questions. They're really easy. I hope.
Okay.
I hope anyway. What's your favorite book?
Oh my goodness, my favorite book. Fiction or nonfiction?
What's your favorite book?
I love the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. That's a nonfiction book, and it dives into the art of making changes, and it has been hugely helpful in my career. Uh, yeah, so I love that one. Um, Nonfiction or fiction, I love To Kill a Mockingbird.
Ah,
Uh, I was a high school English teacher
yeah, that's right.
for several years before coming into this industry, and I taught that book to my ninth and 10th graders. And yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird is just a phenomenal book by Harper Lee.
It amazes me. I've asked this question about 4 or 5 times, and every time people are answering me so far, they've been books you read in high school, right?
Yeah.
So teachers keep teaching those classics, right?
Yeah.
Because they do have an impact. My favorite is not a classic, but it is a classic. It's The Stand. It's one of my favorite books. I read it during high school
Mm,
as well. So there's something about your formative years when you read, different books on what kind of impact it has on you. And I love that book. I could read it all
yeah.
day. I could read it over and over again, which I have. So, favorite television show or movie? I'm changing this up a little bit, so I'm adding a movie in there.
Mm. Oh, yeah. Gosh. We're enjoying Only Murders in the Building right
Ah,
now.
interesting.
And yeah, that's on Hulu. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's in season 5 right now.
Oh
So
wow,
yeah, really enjoying that one.
that's cool.
Martin Short, Steve Martin.
It would be one that I would love to watch, but my wife doesn't like Martin Short too much. I don't know why she doesn't like him, but she just doesn't. And I like both of those actors. They're both great. Haven't had the
Well, does she
opportunity.
like Selena Gomez? Because Selena Gomez
Yeah, she does.
upstages both of them.
she does. She does. She does. I don't know if she could get past Martin Short though. So sorry, Martin, but if you listen to this, um,
Yeah.
yeah, what about? Tell me something you did something last quarter that maybe had an impact on somebody else besides join us. I guess
Gosh.
that wasn't last quarter. That was this quarter, right? Because you've already been on board for a couple weeks now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. First day of the
Mm-hmm.
fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
No, I gosh. Yeah, impact on others. So one of my favorite things, Gary, is helping people navigate their careers,
Hmm.
right? Careers are tricky things. And so I have a number of coaching
Ah,
relationships with former interns, former coworkers, friends, and centered around either getting a job or moving to a different company or getting promoted. Um, and I just love it. I just love kind of working with people and hearing the challenges that they're facing and helping them find answers to those challenges within themselves. It opens up all kinds of areas to be vulnerable and to grow. And so, yeah, I'm grateful to see one of the people I'm coaching got a promotion in a new company. One of the women I'm coaching got hired after 18 months of
wow.
looking. So really gratifying to see us kind of reach those milestones and help people get where they want to be in their careers.
I love that give back, and I know that's one of the things that always has attracted myself to you because I'll admit that I used you as a sounding board as well. As a CEO, you don't get too many sounding boards, right? At least ones that could be open and honest with you, and I think that really helped me a lot through some big challenges. That I had a couple years ago, and we continued having those about once a quarter. I don't know how we'll move forward with that, but we'll figure that out as we go. It's I think it's a big aspect of who you are, and that coaching, that coaching capability that you have, I think can be impacted by anybody who wants to receive it. Right? If you hear it, you can listen to it. So I'm glad you picked that as something you did because I really think that is a core to who you are. Right? So
Well, it's absolutely paying it forward.
right.
And that's a skill that I was taught by my coach and mentor, a man named Mike Orzen.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a company where he uses lean
Ah,
to help his customers be more effective and bring more respect for one another and continuously improve their processes. And yeah, um, having gained those skills from him, I consider it a duty and an honor to bring it to everyone that I can.
there you go. There you go. Well, Jeff, I truly appreciate the conversation. As always, it's great to talk to somebody who has the depth and wealth of knowledge that you have, not only from a FedRAMP perspective, but FedRAMP has people in it. People are the things. The people are the pieces of the puzzle that actually make this world go around, and we need to make sure that we keep people focused on the right thing, the right staff in the right position, and continue to move forward. Here again, appreciate the time and effort that you put into this. And folks, I appreciate your time here with us. As always, I may not be behind the mic or behind the camera, but you always find somebody here behind the shield on a weekly basis. Thank you. Peace out.
Thank you, Gary.
Yep.